Have all members been recorded? The clerk will report the tally.
On this vote, there are 22 yeas and 14 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 24, the Federal Reserve Transparency Act of 2015. The clerk will designate the bill.
H.R. 24 to require a full audit of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System and the Federal Reserve Banks by the Comptroller General of the United States and for other purposes.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered as read and open for amendment at any time. Without objection, so ordered. I understand the sponsor of the bill, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey, will offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute to the bill. Without objection, we will call up the amendment in the nature of a substitute and then recognize Mr. Massey to give one statement on both the ANS and the underlying bill, or do you want to separate them out? One statement. So, without objection, again, let's call up the amendment in the nature of a substitute and then recognize Mr. Massey to give one statement on both the ANS and the underlying bill. The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 24 offered by Mr. Massey of Kentucky.
Now recognize Mr. Massey for 5 minutes to explain the legislation and the ANS. Mr. Massey is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the past century, the value of the dollar has declined by over 95%. During those 100 years, the Federal Reserve, the organization established by Congress to manage Congress's Article I, Section 8 authority to coin money and regulate the value thereof, has operated under a shroud of secrecy. My bill, H.R. 24, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute, the Federal Reserve Transparency Act, puts an end to that reign of secrecy. This is not a controversial bill. Americans demand transparency, and the House of Representatives has responded by passing this legislation twice in previous Congresses by huge bipartisan majorities. When its original author, Representative Ron Paul, first carried the Audit the Fed bill to the floor in the 112th Congress, it passed by a comfortable veto-proof majority, 327 to 98. When Representative Paul Brown brought this bill to the floor in the 113th Congress, it passed by an even larger majority, 333 to 92. In fact, among members of this very committee who were here in those Congresses, all Republicans and over half the Democrats voted for this bill on the floor. Yet, still some have asked, and will ask, why do we need this legislation? Isn't the Federal Reserve already audited? The question deserves an answer. It's true that the Government Accountability Office performs a limited financial audit of parts of the Federal Reserve, but this audit is perfunctory due to the limits placed on the GAO by Congress. The U.S. Code makes several critical exceptions to the Fed's audit protocol of its most crucial activities. Number one, GAO is prohibited from examining Fed transactions or agreements with foreign governments and foreign banks. Number two, GAO is prohibited from examining all Fed actions on monetary policy matters. Number three, GAO is prohibited from auditing transactions made at the discretion of the Federal Open Market Committee. And four, GAO cannot examine any discussion or communication among or between anyone who works at the Fed about any of the activities in the first three areas. When these restrictions were originally added in the 1970s, GAO themselves testified that they, quote, could not see how they could satisfactorily audit the Federal Reserve System without the authority to examine the largest single category of financial transactions and assets that it has, unquote. So you see, even though a cursory audit is done, a programmatic audit needs to be completed in order for Congress to understand what the Fed does and why the Fed does it. Without a complete audit, Congress can't provide oversight of an entity that it created. Let me say that again. Congress created the Federal Reserve. Congress and Congress alone has the constitutional responsibility to coin money and regulate the value thereof. We can outsource the activity, but we can't outsource our responsibility. This brings me to the other question I frequently hear, which is, won't a full audit compromise the Fed's independence? Well, the answer is that without a full audit that includes the decision-making process, how can we know that the Fed is acting independently of, for instance, the executive branch? The Fed's charter is not to be a second Treasury Department. How can we know that the Fed is operating independently of big bank CEOs and Wall Street, given the revolving door of managers between the Fed, the Treasury, and Wall Street? The opportunity for outside pressure and conflicts of interest abound at the Fed. Only a full audit can demonstrate, only a full audit, that the Fed makes decisions independently of the political whims of the president and independently of the profit goals of commercial banks. An organization entrusted with daily decisions that affect the value of Americans' paychecks and the value of their retirement savings, an organization whose mission has morphed into facilitating the bailout of foreign banks. This is an organization that requires a full audit and full oversight from the elected body that created it. I thank the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch, for co-sponsoring this legislation 3 Congresses in a row. He's a colleague on this committee from the other side of the aisle. And I want to thank Chairman Chaffetz for his leadership on this issue throughout the years and for bringing this bill for consideration in committee today. I urge my colleagues to support the bipartisan Federal Reserve Transparency Act and note that the amendment in the nature of a substitute makes only small conforming changes to the original bill. I thank you, and I yield back.
If the gentleman will yield, I really do appreciate your leadership on this. You've been tenacious about it and sharing and talking about it with other members. We're proud to bring it up today. It does enjoy good bipartisan support, as it has in previous Congresses. There really is no argument to knowingly keep yourselves in the dark. When you are arguing against transparency, when you're arguing not to know, something's probably fundamentally wrong with your argument. And so I appreciate Mr. Massey and what you've done for this, and I hope we can champion it not only through this committee but through the floor and then over to the Senate. So again, I thank you for your leadership and your being the lead sponsor on this bill. Yield back, and I assume the gentleman yields back.
Well, just let me agree with the chairman that the argument that some people make that if we actually knew what the Fed was doing, the Fed couldn't do it, is an argument that we need to know what the Fed is doing.
Exactly.
And I yield back to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, for his statement on the bill.
Thank you very much. Today is the 3rd time our committee has reviewed this legislation to require, quote, full audit of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System and the Federal Reserve Banks.